If you feel like you are being watched, you are probably already too late. The Manhattan Gala glittered like a perfect lie under crystal chandeliers, and I, Larkin Hensley, could feel every second of it watching me back. I was not supposed to notice the pattern in the reflections across the marble floor, or the way conversations softened whenever I passed. But I did, and once you notice something like that, you cannot unsee it. Do not look up, I whispered under my breath as I balanced a tray of champagne through the crowd. It was not a suggestion anymore. It was instinct, like stepping away from a fire you cannot see. That is when I felt him before I saw him, Dorian Vescovi. The man everyone in the room subconsciously avoided looking at directly. He did not move like other guests. He moved like the space around him belonged to him. And yet tonight, even he paused, watching me, not in curiosity, but in calculation. I should have kept walking, kept my head down, stayed invisible. Instead, my voice slipped out before I could stop it. Do not look up. His eyes sharpened. What did you just say? I stepped closer, lowering my voice until it barely existed. There is someone watching us. The words did not belong in a place like this. But they were already out, and that is when everything changed. Dorian froze. Not fear, not surprise, something far more dangerous than either. Recognition. His gaze lifted slowly toward the mirrored ceiling above the ballroom. I followed it. Cameras, too many to be security. All angled slightly off, too still, too precise. My chest tightened. You see it now, do you not? I whispered. Dorian did not answer. His hand reached for his phone once, then stopped. It vibrated instead, unknown number. The screen lit up with one line. We see you. The air left the room all at once. Guests kept laughing, unaware, untouched by the shift happening inches away. But I was not laughing. I could feel it now too. Eyes where there should not be eyes. Dorian leaned slightly closer to me. Stay where you are, he said quietly. It was not an order. It was containment. Then I saw it. A red reflection flickered across the glass above me. A laser point. It settled on my chest. And did not move. Dorian's expression changed for the first time. Now, I whispered. Do you understand? His answer came low. Yes. And in that single second, I realized we were not being watched. We were being selected. The realization hit him harder than anything I had ever seen on his face. He turned slightly, scanning the ceiling again. This is not surveillance, he said finally. It is tracking. My throat went dry. Tracking what? His eyes returned to me. Heavy, certain us. The word felt like a lock clicking into place that we could not undo. Somewhere beyond the glass, unseen systems shifted again. And Dorian Vescovi did something I never expected. He took my wrist gently. Do not move, he said again softly. Not yet. I did not move. Not because I trusted him, but because every instinct I had was telling me that the moment I did, something unseen would adjust its aim. Dorian Vescovi kept his hand around my wrist, not tightly, not forcefully, but with a controlled certainty that made it clear he was not going to let me drift into whatever was watching us. The red point of light that had settled on me a moment earlier was gone now, but the absence of it felt worse than its presence. It meant the observer was no longer static. It meant they were reacting, around us. The gala continued as if nothing had shifted. Glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell, and conversations about money and influence carried on in soft waves of normality. It suddenly felt artificial, like a stage play performed for an audience that was no longer human. Dorian finally spoke again, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. We are going to move. Do not look up again. I wanted to ask what I had just seen, wanted to demand answers, but the pressure in his tone stopped me. It was not fear, it was calculation. He guided me forward through the crowd without pulling, only steering, like he was moving through a space that had already been measured. I noticed it then, small details I had missed before. The way certain guests never crossed paths, even when the room was crowded. The way security staff positioned themselves without speaking, forming invisible lanes through the ballroom. The way reflections in the mirrored ceiling seemed slightly delayed, like they were not perfectly synced with reality. You saw it first, Dorian said quietly as we walked. I glanced at him. I did not see anything. I felt it. That is worse, he replied. We reached the edge of the ballroom, where an unmarked service corridor led away from the main floor. The music dulled instantly as the doors closed behind us, replaced by the hum of hidden ventilation and distant machinery. It felt like stepping behind the face of the building. Dorian finally released my wrist, but stayed close enough that I could feel his presence tracking every sound. This level of observation is not random. He said, someone is mapping movement patterns in real time. I frowned, trying to process it. Mapping people in a hotel? He looked at me directly for the first time since the whisper. Not people, decisions. That word hit harder than I expected. Decisions. I thought back to the ceiling, the cameras I had seen, the way they were angled. Not pointed at the room, pointed at intersections, pathways, choices. I stopped walking. It is predicting behavior, I said before I could stop myself. Dorian's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. I swallowed. The cameras are not just watching. They are tracking probability routes, where people will move next based on crowd flow, sound, even attention shifts. It is not surveillance. It is anticipation. For the first time, something subtle changed in his expression. Not surprise, confirmation. That matches what my people intercepted, he said. We reached a private elevator at the end of the corridor. There were no buttons on the outside, only a black glass panel that lit up as Dorian approached. Your people? I asked. He did not answer immediately. The elevator doors opened silently, revealing an interior lit in soft white light that felt almost clinical compared to the warmth of the gala. Step in, he said instead. I hesitated. Where are we going? Somewhere that is not already calculated, he replied. That answer should not have reassured me, but it did. The doors closed before I could change my mind. The elevator moved smoothly upward, too smoothly, with no sound of mechanical strain. On the mirrored surface inside, I saw reflections that did not match our movements perfectly. My stomach tightened. They are still watching, I said quietly. Dorian studied the reflection instead of me. Yes, he said. And now they know we know. I turned toward him. That makes us more predictable. It makes us aware, he corrected. The elevator slowed, but did not stop at any marked floor. Instead, it bypassed visible levels entirely. That should not have been possible in a public building. This is not standard architecture, I said. Dorian gave a faint nod. It was modified. For what? He finally looked at me fully. For people who prefer not to be observed. The elevator came to a stop without announcement. The doors did not open immediately. Instead, a soft chime sounded, and for a brief second, every reflective surface inside the cabin darkened. In that darkness, I saw it again, not a red dot. A grid, expanding, and at the center of it, our position marked in silence. Then the doors opened, revealing a dimly lit upper level that I had never seen from inside the building. And Dorian Vescovi said one thing as he stepped forward first. Now we find out who is building the map. I stepped out of the elevator first, but it felt less like exiting and more like crossing into a space that had been waiting for us. The air on this level of the building was different, quieter in a way that felt intentional, as if even sound had been engineered to behave. There were no guests here, no music, no polished celebration, only long corridors lined with glass panels that reflected faint light in uneven pulses. Dorian Vescovi moved beside me without hesitation, his presence steady but alert, as if he already knew parts of this place by memory. This floor is not on public records, he said calmly. I glanced at him. Then how do we even know where we are? We are where the pattern leads, he replied. That answer should have made no sense, but after everything I had seen, it felt like the only language left. We walked deeper into the corridor until the architecture began to shift. The glass panels turned into darker surfaces, almost like black mirrors, and each one reacted subtly as we passed, faint lines of light tracing invisible data paths across their surfaces. I slowed without realizing it. Do you see that? I asked. Dorian did not answer immediately. He was watching the reflections, not the hallway itself. Yes, he said finally. It is live mapping. My chest tightened. Live mapping of what? He stopped walking. For a moment, the silence between us felt heavier than anything before it. Human movement under uncertainty. He said, they are not tracking individuals. They are tracking hesitation. I frowned. Hesitation. He nodded once. Every decision point. Every moment someone could turn left or right, stop or continue, speak or remain silent. That is what they are collecting. I felt a cold awareness settle in my stomach. It was not surveillance in the way I understood it. It was something more invasive, something that treated choice itself as data. We reached a wide observation room at the end of the corridor. The glass wall in front of us looked out over the entire ballroom below, but from this angle, the space no longer felt like a celebration. It looked structured, divided into invisible grids that only became visible when you focused long enough. Small points of light flickered across those grids, shifting constantly, like neurons firing in a larger system. "This is what I intercepted," Dorian said quietly, "a predictive model layered over live human activity. It identifies targets based on convergence behavior." I stepped closer to the glass. "Targets. People who will reach a specific outcome without realizing it," he said. My eyes scanned the ballroom below. The guests were still moving, laughing, talking, completely unaware of the structure now visible from above. But I could see it, subtle clustering, guided flows, pauses that were not random anymore. It felt like watching a river being redirected in real time. "Why would someone build this?" I asked. Dorian's reflection appeared beside mine in the glass. "Control," he said simply, "but not of people, of outcomes." I turned toward him. "That is impossible. You cannot predict every variable in a room like that." He looked at me then. "Directly, no," he agreed. "Not every variable. Only the ones that matter." A faint alert pulsed across one of the glass panels behind us, drawing both our attention. Lines of data reconfigured rapidly, and a single segment of the ballroom below lit up in a soft amber tone. I felt my breath catch. That highlighted zone aligned exactly with where I had been standing minutes earlier. "That is me," I said quietly. Dorian did not deny it. Instead, he studied the shifting data with narrowed focus. "You disrupted their baseline pattern," he said, "when you spoke." I shook my head slightly. "I did not do anything." "You changed my response," he corrected. "That alone creates a deviation." The idea made my mind race. One moment of speaking, one sentence whispered in a crowded room, and suddenly a system like this adjusted around it. "So what happens now?" I asked. Dorian's expression tightened slightly, the first sign of uncertainty I had seen in him. "Now they stabilize the deviation," he said, "which means they will isolate the variable." I understood immediately what that meant. I looked back at the ballroom below, suddenly aware that the patterns were no longer just observing. They were adjusting toward correction. "We need to leave," I said quickly. Dorian nodded once, yes, but not through the way we came. He turned toward a secondary door behind the observation panel, one I had not noticed before. It blended into the wall until he pressed his hand against it, and it opened with a quiet mechanical release. Beyond it was another corridor, narrower, darker, unmarked. "If this system is correcting for us," I said as we moved, "then it already knows where we go next." Dorian's voice was steady, but lower now. "Then we do not go where it expects." I followed him into the darker corridor, feeling the building itself seemed to recalibrate behind us. And somewhere deep within the system we had just uncovered, I could almost feel the moment it stopped observing us and started deciding what to do about us instead. I did not realize how fast a building could feel like it was thinking until the corridor behind us went silent in a way that felt deliberate. Dorian Vescovi did not slow down, but I could feel his attention shifting in small increments, like he was listening to something I could not hear. The narrow passage we had entered was darker than the observation level, lined with industrial panels that reflected faint pulses of light traveling in sequences too structured to be random. "They are rerouting us," I said without thinking. Dorian's voice came immediately, calm but sharper now. "Yes." I looked at him. "You already knew they would do this." He did not deny it. A system like this does not chase. It guides. That sentence made my stomach tighten because it implied intent, not automation. We reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 identical paths. No signage, no indicators, just mirrored walls that reflected us in slightly delayed synchronization. I stopped. "Which way?" I asked. Dorian did not answer immediately. He studied the reflections, then stepped forward and placed his hand lightly against the center wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint pulse of light spread outward from his palm, like the building had recognized contact. The left corridor dimmed, the right corridor brightened slightly. The center remained neutral. "It is responding to you," I said. Dorian looked at his hand. "It is testing input variables." I felt a cold realization settle in. "So we are inside it now." "We have been inside it since the elevator," he said, We chose the center corridor and continued forward. The deeper we went, the more the environment changed. The walls became smoother, less architectural, and more computational, as if the building was transitioning from physical structure to digital interface. I began to notice patterns forming in the reflections again, not random anymore, but structured like flowcharts mapping decision outcomes. This is not just surveillance, I said quietly. It is simulation. Dorian nodded once, predictive layering across physical space. I swallowed. Then it is already running scenarios about us. Multiple, he confirmed. We stopped at another intersection, but this time there was no branching path. Instead, the corridor opened into a circular chamber filled with suspended glass panels floating from floor to ceiling. Each panel displayed fragments of movement from different parts of the building, but not in real time. Slightly ahead, seconds into the future, I felt my breath catch. That is not possible, I whispered. Dorian stepped closer to one of the panels. On it, I saw myself standing exactly where I was, but a few seconds ahead, turning my head slightly toward the left corridor. Then, in reality, I felt the impulse to turn. I stopped myself. It is predicting micro-decisions, I said quickly. Not events, choices before they happen. Dorian's expression remained controlled, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes accelerating. That means it is learning from resistance as well. I looked at him. Resistance. He turned slightly toward me. You did not follow the expected pattern earlier. That created deviation. Now it adapts in real time. One of the floating panels flickered. The version of me inside it stopped moving altogether. Frozen, not paused, removed from sequence. What does that mean? I asked. Dorian's voice lowered. It means you are no longer a variable they can simulate cleanly. A new panel lit up beside it. This one showed Dorian. But in the projection, he was already looking directly at me before I spoke. I felt a tightening in my chest. It is ahead of you too, I said. He nodded once. It is attempting convergence. The chamber lights shifted slightly, and for the first time I noticed faint mechanical sounds beneath the silence, like distant recalibration happening behind the walls. We need to exit this layer, Dorian said before it locks prediction stability. I stepped back instinctively. How do we exit something that is predicting us? He looked at me directly. By becoming unpredictable together. That did not sound like strategy, it sounded like risk. But before I could respond, every floating panel in the chamber shifted at once. All projections aligned. Every version of me, every version of him, every possible movement path collapsed into a single outcome. And in that unified simulation, both of us were standing still, looking up at the same point above us. I realized slowly that I was already starting to follow it. Dorian reached for my hand again, firmer this time. Do not trust the projection, he said, trust the gap between them. I forced myself to focus on his voice instead of the images around us. The panels began to flicker faster now, unstable, as if reacting to conflicting inputs. It is struggling, I whispered. Good, Dorian said. Then the entire chamber dimmed at once, and a soft automated voice I had not heard before echoed through the space. Not from speakers, but from everywhere at once. Deviation confirmed. Dorian tightened his grip slightly. Now it knows we are not following the script, he said. And as the lights shifted again, I realized the simulation was no longer predicting us. It was rewriting itself around us. I remember the exact moment everything stopped feeling like a building and started feeling like a mind reacting to us. The chamber around us did not simply dim after the system confirmed deviation. It hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue following its own logic. Dorian Vescovi did not let go of my hand. His grip was steady, grounding, but his attention was fully locked on the floating panels that were now flickering like unstable thoughts. It is recalculating, I said quietly. Dorian's voice was controlled but sharper than before. It is no longer predicting, it is adapting. One of the glass panels shifted suddenly, and the image inside it changed from fragmented simulations into a single continuous feed. It was us, but not as we were. It was us a few seconds ahead again, moving through the chamber, but every possible direction we could take appeared at once, overlapping like branching timelines collapsing into one. I felt my breathing tighten. That is not observation anymore, I whispered. That is correction. Dorian stepped closer to the nearest panel, studying it with a focus that felt almost dangerous in its calm. Correction implies it believes there is an error, he said. I looked at him. We are the error. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then the system responded. All panels in the chamber synchronized at once, and every projection froze on a single shared frame, me turning toward Dorian as if about to speak. But in reality, I had not spoken yet. The system had already decided what I would say. A faint pressure filled the air, not physical but psychological, like the environment itself was trying to guide my next action. Do not follow it, Dorian said immediately. I blinked, forcing myself to break eye contact with the projection. The moment I did, the image flickered violently. It reacts to confirmation bias, I said quickly. If I look at it too long, it locks the outcome. Dorian nodded once, then we stopped feeding it attention. The chamber lights shifted again, dimming slightly as if responding to reduced input. The floating panels began to drift apart, their synchronization weakening, but the system did not retreat. Instead, it changed strategy. A new sound emerged, subtle at first, like distant footsteps that did not belong to either of us. Then it became clearer. It was not footsteps, it was sequencing. A rhythmic pattern spreading through the chamber, aligning with our movement, matching our breathing pace. I felt a chill rise through me. It is syncing with us physically, I said. Dorian released my hand for the first time since this began, and immediately the sequencing shifted. The rhythm destabilized. It is trying to stabilize a shared baseline, he said. I stepped back instinctively. What does that mean? Dorian did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the center of the chamber alone. The panels reacted instantly, recalibrating around him, tightening their projections. I watched as every version of him in the floating displays began to converge toward identical behavior patterns. It is trying to reduce variability. He said, if it removes unpredictability, it can control outcome probability with near certainty. I understood then what the system was doing. It was not just predicting us, it was narrowing us, turning us into a fixed equation. Then we stopped being consistent, I said. Dorian glanced at me. That is already happening. Another shift occurred. The projections no longer showed future possibilities. They began showing failure states. Every panel displayed different outcomes, but all of them ended in a way that removed divergence. Isolation, separation, control restored. I felt my chest tighten. It is trying to divide us, I said. Dorian's expression hardened slightly, yes. The chamber temperature seemed to drop subtly, or maybe it was just perception reacting to pattern recognition. The system was no longer passive. It was actively shaping environment cues to influence behavior. We need to disrupt the model entirely, I said. Dorian looked at me for a long moment. There is one way, he said. I hesitated. What way? He turned toward the center of the chamber again. We remove ourselves as reference points. I frowned. That does not make sense. It does, he replied. If the system cannot anchor prediction on either of us, it collapses correlation. I looked around at the floating panels, every one of them still trying to simulate outcomes based on our presence. How do we remove ourselves? I asked quietly. Dorian's voice lowered. We break synchronization completely. He stepped back toward me again, and for a brief moment, I saw something different in his expression. Not fear, not certainty, something closer to acceptance of unknown variables. When I tell you to move, he said, do not follow rhythm. Do not follow light. Do not follow me. My throat tightened. That sounds like separating. It is not separation, he corrected. It is disruption. The chamber lights pulsed once, then twice, faster now. The system was accelerating its recalibration attempts. Dorian reached out again, but this time he did not take my hand. He paused just before contact. Now, he said quietly, and everything around us shifted at once, as if the system had decided to force a conclusion before we could break it completely. The chamber changed before either of us moved. It did not dim this time. It flattened, as if every choice in the room had been pressed into one thin line. The floating panel stopped showing futures and began showing absence. No branches, no alternate paths, no generous mistake left for us to hide inside. I felt the space between Dorian Vescovi and me being measured again, but not by distance. It was measuring agreement. It is forcing convergence, I said. Dorian scanned the walls, then the floor, then the empty air above the center. No, He said, "It is removing options." The words landed hard. I looked around and understood. The system was not predicting us anymore. It was deleting every version of us except the one it preferred. A panel flashed with the gala again, my whisper. His pause, the red point, then the image vanished. "If we move together, it wins," Dorian said. "If we hesitate together, it wins," I swallowed. "Then we stop being together." He looked at me sharply, and for the first time, the calculation in his face cracked into something human. "Explain." "It needs correlation," I said. "It needs us to answer each other. If we break rhythm, it has nothing clean to hold." The chamber reacted at once. A ripple moved through the glass, not violent, but alert. Dorian stepped away from me, slow and deliberate. I stepped in the other direction. The panels flickered, trying to connect our movements into one pattern. They failed. A soft tone rose from the walls, urging us back toward the same path. I ignored it. Dorian ignored it too, but without looking at me. That mattered. No signal, no shared cue. The lights lost their perfect timing. Some panels followed him. Others followed me. A few went blank. "It is confused." I whispered. "Good," Dorian said. "Let it stay confused." The system offered a door in the far wall, outlined in calm white light. It looked safe. It looked reasonable. That made me trust it less. I turned away from it. Dorian did the opposite. He walked toward the door, then stopped one step short and looked at the floor instead. The outline flickered. For the first time, the chamber seemed unsure which of us mattered more. I felt the pressure loosen. Not enough to feel free, but enough to breathe. The system had wanted a pair. We had become two problems. I kept my eyes on the empty space between us and forced myself to notice details that did not belong to any pattern. A loose thread on my cuff. A scratch on the floor near Dorian's shoe. A faint stain in the marble that looked older than the hotel renovation. The chamber disliked those details. They were too small to become strategy, too ordinary to become prophecy. Whenever I focused on them, the panels lost a fraction of their confidence. Dorian noticed without acknowledging me. He shifted his attention to his own useless details, a scuff on the cufflink, dust along one glass seam, the uneven rhythm of a vent behind the wall. The system tried to collect those observations and failed to make them meaningful. That gave us another narrow second. I used it to move one step sideways. He used it to remain still. The room split its response again. For the first time, its intelligence felt large but clumsy, powerful but impatient. It could read fear, ambition, and obedience. It had trouble reading boredom, fatigue, and private irritation. I almost smiled at that. In a room built to defeat criminal empires and hidden watchers, the weakest point might be two people refusing to act cinematic enough. The thought steadied me more than courage would have. Courage was dramatic. The system knew drama. Petty human inconvenience was harder to map. A thin red line moved across the floor, searching for the distance between us. I stepped over it without rhythm. Dorian let it pass under his shoe. The line split, doubled, then vanished. Somewhere behind the wall, a relay clicked too fast, like a nervous finger tapping glass. The sound gave the room away. It was not divine. It was machinery making guesses. The next sound was almost gentle. It came from every wall at once, a low guiding tone that tried to make panic feel like intuition. A path lit near my feet. Another appeared near Dorian. Neither path led to an exit. Both led toward the center. "Do not follow comfort," he said without turning. I almost laughed, because nothing about this place felt comfortable, but then I understood. The system was not using fear now. It was using relief. A panel showed me walking to Dorian. Another showed him reaching for my hand. Both images looked natural, even protective. That was the trap. Natural meant predictable. Predictable meant owned. I stayed still until the light shifted away from me. Dorian moved only when the wall expected him to stop. The panel beside him stuttered. The chamber tried again, brighter this time, offering a simpler story. Waitress rescued by powerful man guided by strange girl. Two roles the system could file, sell, and close. I felt anger cut through the fear. "It is turning us into a story it understands," I said. "Then give it a story that does not behave," Dorian replied. He took off his black cufflink and dropped it onto the floor. The tiny metal piece rolled toward the center, catching light with each turn. Every panel followed it. For 3 seconds, The room cared more about an object than about us. Dorian used that gap to step sideways. I used it to move backward. The system split its attention and lost precision. One wall flashed move, another flashed wait. A third showed the gala again, but the memory arrived out of order. My whisper came before I opened my mouth. Dorian froze before he saw the ceiling. It is rebuilding from fragments, I said. It is guessing. Then do not correct it, he said. The white door brightened, pushing for one decision. I looked at it and chose nothing. Dorian looked at me for half a second, then looked away before the system could turn that glance into agreement. The door dimmed. A hidden mechanism clicked behind the wall, frustrated but not broken. The system still had power. It still owned the room. But it had lost the clean shape of us. That was the first real wound we gave it. The images of us on the panels became more flattering as the system grew more desperate. In one version, Dorian pulled me behind him like a shielded witness. In another, I clutched his sleeve and let him decide for both of us. In another, he ordered men through an earpiece while I stared at him with grateful fear. Each version was clean, usable, almost marketable. None of them was true. I was scared, yes, but I was also angry. I had served men like that all night, men who believed a uniform made me background. The system had learned from rooms like the gala. It understood hierarchy because hierarchy was easy math. Dorian watched the same panels, and something dark moved behind his eyes. It wants me familiar, he said. Cruel? I asked. Simple. The word felt worse. He took another step that made no tactical sense, then stopped to adjust the loose cuff on his sleeve. The panel trying to cast him as rescuer blurred. I turned my tray towel inside out and folded it with unnecessary care. The version of me clinging to him dissolved. Our rebellion had no elegance. It was made of awkward pauses, wrong timing, and refusing roles that would have made the story easier to sell. The chamber did not like unsellable people. It began to stutter around us. One panel tried a new angle. It showed the crowd outside the chamber, guests still laughing beneath chandeliers, unaware that their movements fed the hidden map. I saw a waiter I knew from the service station and felt a stab of anger. The system had not only trapped Dorian and me. It had been feeding on everyone who believed they were simply attending a party. The chamber answered our silence with instructions: move, align, resolve. The words appeared across the glass in sharp, white letters, too simple for something that had spent so much effort pretending to be invisible. I felt the command before I chose to read it. My body wanted to obey, step forward, pick the door. End the pressure. That was how the system worked. It made surrender feel like common sense. Dorian saw my weight shift. Larkin, he said, and my name cut through the pull. I stopped. The panels reacted to that too, instantly linking his voice to my pause. Do not use my name again, I said. His jaw tightened, but he understood. Even concern could become a leash here. He turned away, then listen only to yourself. I closed my eyes and focused on ordinary things the room could not own. The ache in my feet from the gala shoes. The smell of champagne on my sleeve. The memory of my own apartment kitchen, where the refrigerator rattled every morning before sunrise. Small, useless truths, human truths. The command on the wall flickered. Move became MVE. Align became AIGN. The missing letters felt like cracks in a mask. Dorian moved somewhere to my left, but I did not follow the sound. I counted my breaths out of order. 4, 1, 7, 2. The tone in the walls faltered. It cannot time you, Dorian said from a distance. Do not help it. The center of the chamber pulsed, and the white door opened a few inches. Beyond it was a corridor washed in soft gold light. It looked like the hotel again. It looked like the world. I knew it was lying. That is not outside, I said. No, Dorian answered. It is the ending it wrote. The door opened wider, inviting me to prove I wanted survival. Instead, I sat on the floor. The move was so plain, so undramatic, that the chamber failed to respond for a full second. Dorian almost smiled. Then he did something worse for the system. He laughed once, quietly, without permission. Every panel shivered. The room could model terror. It could model obedience. It did not know what to do with refusal that looked like exhaustion and laughter. I thought about all the tiny commands I had obeyed before tonight without calling them commands. Smile when a guest snapped his fingers. Apologize when someone stepped into my path. Keep walking when a hand stayed too long near my waist. The chamber was only a more honest version of the same pressure. It displayed the order instead of hiding it inside manners. That recognition changed my fear. This was not some alien intelligence beyond human understanding. It had been trained on the worst habits of powerful rooms. It expected the poor to move aside, the frightened to comply, and the dangerous to dominate. I opened my eyes and looked at the command again. Move. Align. Resolve. No, I said, not loudly. The word did not need volume. Dorian heard it anyway, but he did not answer. Good. The system waited for him to complete the moment and received nothing. I said it again, quieter. No. This time the nearest panel flickered hard enough to show the service corridor for half a second. Real concrete. A rusted pipe. A coil of orange cable. Not freedom yet, but texture. The system covered it quickly with white instruction text, but I had seen enough. There was a place behind the performance. There was always a place behind performance. Workers knew that better than kings. The corridor glimpse returned for one heartbeat, clearer now. I saw a yellow caution sticker, a mop bucket, and a wall phone with its cord cut. Ordinary evidence became treasure. Dorian saw it too, though he gave no sign. The system erased the image, but too late. It had revealed that its perfect chamber still depended on service spaces no rich guest would ever notice. After that, the chamber stopped trying to seduce us and started looking backward. The walls filled with records from the gala. Crystal light, moving waiters, men in dark suits. My hand around the champagne tray, Dorian's profile turning at the exact second I whispered. The same moment appeared again and again until the room became a museum of one mistake. It found the origin, I said. Dorian stood across from me, half hidden by pale reflections. It found the first choice it could not price. The phrase settled in me. Price. That was the language of his world. Everything had cost, leverage, pressure, consequence, but my warning had not been bought. It had been instinct. The system could not understand that. A panel zoomed in on my face at the gala. I looked smaller than I remembered, tired, frightened, carrying a tray no one noticed. Then the image split. In one version, I stayed silent. In another, I looked up and panicked. In another, Dorian walked away before I reached him. Hundreds of clean alternatives, safer alternatives, dead alternatives. It is trying to replace the whisper, I said. With something easier. Dorian's voice hardened. Let it try. The walls built a new scene. Gala music swelled. Guests turned elegant and slow. The system placed me back beside his table, tray in hand, mouth closed. I felt the pull of that false past. If I accepted it, maybe none of this would have happened. No chamber, no pressure, no invisible map. Then I saw the red reflection settle on the false version of me anyway. Silence did not save her. It only made her useful. My fear changed shape. No, I said. The false gala cracked. Dorian took one step toward the center, not toward me. She warned me, he said, voice low. That happened. The chamber pulsed, trying to override him too. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. And I listened. The words did more damage than any movement. The reconstructed gala broke apart into shards of light. For once, the system had not failed because we confused it. It failed because we refused to let it edit the only honest moment in the room. The origin scene tried to tempt me with guilt next. It showed the gala continuing without my warning. Dorian lived in one version. A guard died in another. In another, the red point moved from my chest to a stranger near the bar. The system arranged those images like accusations. Choose one life. Choose one consequence. Except that silence would have been cleaner. My throat tightened before I understood the trick. It was not showing truth. It was showing leverage. Dorian's world used leverage with money, bloodlines, debt, and fear. The chamber used it with possibility. Do not bargain with unfinished futures, he said. The line sounded like something he had learned the expensive way. I looked at the false scenes and forced myself to remember the real one. My hand had shaken. My voice had almost failed. I had warned him anyway because the room felt wrong and no one else was willing to name it. That was not grand destiny. It was not chosen one nonsense. It was a tired waitress trusting a bad feeling. The chamber hated that because instinct has no invoice. It cannot be traced through a clean chain of cause. The panel strained to make my whisper strategic, romantic, criminal, heroic. I let it remain small. Small did not mean weak. Small was where the system had first missed us. The false gala tried one last kindness. It showed me leaving work early, missing the whisper, going home through rain with my tips folded in my pocket. I wanted that version with a physical ache. Then the image followed me home and placed a camera above my apartment door. I let the ache turn cold. The system did not offer peace. It offered a slower cage. The broken gala collapsed into a single bright point at the center of the chamber. It was no longer a door or a path. It was a verdict being assembled from memory, fear, and calculation. The pressure returned, sharper than before. The system could not erase the whisper, so it tried to contain it. Every surface narrowed toward that point. My skin prickled. The room felt smaller with each breath. It is isolating the choice, I said. Dorian's eyes stayed on the light. Then it will isolate you next. I wanted to answer, but the point opened, and inside it I saw myself in dozens of versions. Waitress, witness, variable, trigger, error. Each label tried to settle over me like a name. None fit. The system did not care. It only needed one that worked. Dorian moved, and this time the chamber let him. That frightened me more than resistance would have. It wants you near the center, I said. Yes. Why? Because it understands men like me. His voice was flat, but not empty. Power moves toward control. It expects me to claim the source of disruption. I looked at the bright point me. He did not soften the truth. Yes. The floor beneath him lit in a path of narrow white rectangles. A clean route, a role made for him. The dangerous man takes the girl. The system liked that story. It understood ownership better than trust. Dorian looked down at the path, then slowly stepped off it. The light snapped out. I do not collect people, he said. The chamber shook hard enough to blur the panels. I felt something inside me steady, not because I trusted him completely. I did not. But because, in that second, he had rejected the easiest version of himself. The bright point faltered. The labels around my image broke apart. Waitress remained for half a second, then vanished too. I stepped away from the center on my own. Not toward Dorian. Not toward the door. Toward the darkest wall, where the system had offered nothing. The darkness opened a thin vertical line. Not an exit. A flaw. Dorian saw it at the same time I did. Neither of us moved together. We let the flaw widen by refusing to become the story it wanted. Dorian's rejection of the path did not make him gentle. I did not suddenly mistake him for a good man and a clean story. I saw the violence he carried in his stillness. I saw how easily he understood cages because part of him had built them for other people. That made his choice sharper, not softer. The system had offered him the version of power he knew best, and he had stepped away from it, while every instinct in his life must have told him to step in. He looked at the dark flaw in the wall, then at the bright center, then nowhere at all. It cannot understand restraint, he said. Most men in that ballroom could not either, I replied. His mouth tightened, almost a smile and almost pain. The chamber tried to use that exchange. A panel showed us closer than we were, his hand reaching for my shoulder, my face turned up to his. I hated how quickly the image tried to become romance, because romance was another container. Dorian hated it too. No, he said, and the single word was colder than a threat. The panel cracked into static. Whatever was growing between us had to remain unnamed, or it would be captured. Trust, if it came, would have to arrive without performance. The flaw widened whenever we refused the clean version of ourselves. It narrowed whenever fear made us too readable. I learned its rhythm quickly. Think like prey, it tightened. Think like a witness, it paused. Think like a tired woman with rent due and sore feet, it lost interest. That was not glamorous, but it was mine. The flaw in the wall was barely wider than a blade, but it changed the room more than the bright center ever had. It was not beautiful, it was not inviting. It did not glow with false safety. It simply existed where the system had forgotten to finish itself. Cold air slipped through it, carrying the first real smell I had noticed in what felt like hours. Dust, concrete, old wiring, something outside the performance. My eyes burned with relief, but I held still. The chamber was watching for hunger now. Wanting the exit too clearly would make the exit part of its design. Dorian understood that before I did. He turned away from the flaw and faced the center. You cannot run at freedom in a room that measures desire, he said. So what do we do? I asked. We make it less interesting. That sounded absurd until he loosened his tie, sat on the floor, and began removing one shoe. I stared at him. Are you serious? Completely. The The system paused. The Mafia boss, barefoot on a prediction chamber floor, did not fit any useful pattern. I almost laughed again, but this time I held it in. Instead, I took the towel from my service apron and wiped champagne residue from my wrist. Small acts, boring acts, acts without drama. The bright center dimmed. The flaw widened another inch. The room had been built for threat, pursuit, obedience, and power. It had no appetite for ordinary maintenance. Dorian set his shoe beside him with grave precision. It is losing narrative pressure, he said. Please do not make that sound heroic. His mouth twitched. I would never. The exchange was small, but it belonged to us. Not romance, not rescue. Just two people refusing to be useful in the expected way. The flaw widened enough to show a service passage beyond the wall. No gold light, no polished elevator. Just raw concrete and a red emergency pipe. I had never loved an ugly hallway more. Do we go? I asked. Dorian did not look at me. Not together. Of course. I rose first, slowly, as if I had only decided to stretch my legs. He stayed seated. The chamber did not stop me. I stepped through the flaw alone. The ugly hallway beyond the flaw gave me a new fear. Not the fear of being trapped, but the fear of choosing the wrong moment to leave. The chamber had trained me fast. Every exit could be bait. Every relief could be a handle. Dorian's absurd performance with the shoe bought us time, but time also made me notice how tired I was. My shoulders ached from holding fear too long. My calves burned. The service towel in my hand had gone damp with sweat and spilled champagne. The system did not know what to do with that either. It understood targets. It understood variables. It did not understand a woman who needed 5 seconds because her feet hurt. I used those 5 seconds. I studied the flaw and saw scratches around its edge, older than our arrival. Someone else had found this gap before us, or someone had built it as a mercy they were not supposed to leave. There were others, I said. Dorian followed my gaze. His face changed by almost nothing, but I saw it. Maybe. Did they get out? He did not give me comfort he could not prove. We are about to learn what kind of mercy this was. That answer was grim, but honest. Honest was better than safe-looking light. Dorian kept his gaze away from the opening, but his body angled slightly to shield it from the center. He was helping without claiming the help. I understood the restraint cost him effort. Men like him survived by taking command of rooms. Tonight, command itself was bait. Watching him refuse it told me more than any confession would have. The passage beyond the wall was narrow, unfinished, and blessedly real. My shoes scraped concrete. A bare pipe vibrated overhead. Somewhere far below, I heard the faint mechanical life of the hotel, elevators, vents, water moving through walls. Ordinary systems, honest systems. Behind me, the chamber remained silent. I wanted to turn back for Dorian, but wanting was dangerous in that place, so I walked 3 more steps before stopping. The passage bent left. A security camera hung dead in the corner, its lens cracked from the inside. That sight gave me more courage than any speech could have. The watching had limits. Dorian appeared behind me a few seconds later, one shoe still in his hand, suit jacket open, expression unreadable. He had waited long enough that the room could not make our exits match. You look ridiculous, I said. Good, he replied. It may save my life. The wall behind him sealed without drama. No pulse, no final scream, just a tired click. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt different here. It did not measure us. It did not ask us to become anything. It only existed. Dorian put his shoe back on and looked down the passage. This route should not be here. But it is. That is what worries me. We moved through the corridor with several feet between us, not because the system still demanded it, but because the habit had become caution. The farther we went, the more the hotel returned around us. A maintenance closet, a metal stairwell, the smell of bleach. A half-empty paper coffee cup on a fuse box. Evidence of people who fixed things without knowing what waited behind the walls. At the stairwell door, Dorian stopped. Someone had carved a small symbol into the metal near the handle. 3 vertical lines crossed by a circle. I recognized it from the chamber, hidden inside the data fragments. My stomach tightened that mark. I said it was in there. Dorian touched the carving without pressing it. His face went colder than I had seen all night. It was not built for tonight, he said. It was waiting for someone who could notice it. I thought of the gala, the whisper, the red reflection. Then I thought of the false versions where I stayed silent and still ended up marked. For me, I asked. Dorian did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. The passage forced us back into bodies. After so much glass and prediction, every practical obstacle felt strangely intimate. The stairwell door stuck. Dorian had to shoulder it once, then twice, before it opened. A cobweb brushed my cheek and nearly made me gasp. My tray towel snagged on a screw head. These stupid little problems saved me from thinking too far ahead. The map might still exist, but it had to share space with rust, dust, and bad maintenance. I trusted that more than any glowing panel. Halfway down the stairs, a speaker crackled above us. For 1 second I expected the chamber's voice, but all that came through was kitchen staff arguing over a missing delivery. Human irritation, alive and messy. I nearly cried from relief. Dorian heard the break in my breathing and did not comment. Instead, he slowed half a step without making it look like help. I noticed that too. Help that did not announce itself was harder for the map to use. At the carved symbol, the relief ended. The mark was clean, deliberate, and recent. Someone had touched this route after the hotel was built. Someone knew the hidden chamber leaked into ordinary walls. Dorian's silence around that fact was heavy. Mine was worse. At the stairwell landing, another phone rang behind a locked maintenance cage. It rang once, then stopped. Dorian looked at the cage as if he recognized the timing. My people are not doing that, he said. The admission chilled me. Until then, part of me had assumed his world could answer this one. Now I saw the truth. His empire had been mapped too. We climbed down 6 flights before the stairwell opened behind the hotel kitchen. Heat, steam, and shouted orders crashed over us like proof that the world still existed. A cook cursed at a burned pan. A dishwasher shoved trays through a machine. Someone laughed too loudly near the prep counter. No one looked at us for more than a second. After the chamber, that indifference felt holy. Dorian guided himself, not me, through the edge of the chaos. He kept enough distance that I could choose my own path. I noticed that. I also noticed his men waiting near the service exit, faces tense, hands visible, trying very hard not to stare at their boss holding one shoe by the heel. One of them opened his mouth. Dorian looked at him once. The man closed it. Outside, Manhattan rain had turned the alley into black glass. Sirens moved somewhere far away. The gala music was gone. For one breath, I thought we had escaped into an ordinary emergency. Then Dorian's phone lit up. No number, no name. Just a message. You left the room. You did not leave the map. He showed it to me without speaking. The rain seemed colder after that. Across the alley, high above the service entrance, a dark security camera slowly turned toward us. Its lens was cracked, just like the one in the passage, but it still moved. I felt the old instinct rise in my throat. Do not look up. This time I swallowed the words. Dorian watched me choose silence and understood why. They are outside the building. I said no, he answered, voice low. The building was only one organ. I looked down the alley, at traffic, windows, reflections, every bright surface that might be watching. Then what is the body? Dorian's expression hardened into something I had not seen before. Not control, not anger, recognition. That is what they wanted me to find. A black car rolled to the alley mouth and stopped without headlights. Before either of us moved, every phone in the kitchen behind us began ringing at once. Dorian looked at me. I looked at the camera. And somewhere above the rain, something unseen adjusted its gaze again. The ringing phones behind us made the kitchen freeze. Cooks, servers, dishwashers, managers, everyone reached for a device at once. For one impossible second, the ordinary world and the hidden one overlapped perfectly. Steam rose from pasta water, rain tapped the alley. Dozens of screens glowed with the same blank white light. No message yet, just attention. Dorian's men moved closer, but he lifted one hand to stop them. I understood why. A protective formation would be a pattern. Panic would be a pattern. Running would be a pattern. The camera above the door turned another inch. Its cracked lens reflected the alley, the car, my face, Dorian's hand, every phone behind us waiting to speak. I remembered the chamber showing me false endings. This felt worse because it was outside, under real rain, with real people who had not chosen any of this. Then the phones chimed together. One sentence appeared on every screen. She saw the first room. Show her the next. No one breathed. Dorian looked at me, and this time neither of us looked away fast enough to hide the fear. The black car's rear window lowered by an inch. There was no face inside, only darkness and the faint red blink of another camera. The map had not ended. It had opened. The kitchen staff stared at their phones, then at us, waiting for someone important to explain the impossible. Dorian did not. For once, his silence was not power. It was protection. The less he said, the fewer patterns he gave the watchers. I stepped into the rain first, because the map expected him to lead. The camera followed me.